Hello everyone and welcome to another video. If you're new to my channel, I'm Ronald Segovia. I'm an artist trying to make it as an artist. In this video, I'm going to show you the process I did for this illustration. If you're interested in that, feel free to stick around till the end. Probably I'll get into a few tips and tricks that you might find useful for your digital painting. Also, if you can, hit that subscribe button. It's completely free for you and it helps me a bunch. If you're interested in this type of content, I try to post as consistently as I can. And if you have any questions about any of the things I'm talking about in this video, feel free to add a comment and I'll try to reply to you. So without further ado, here's the process. If you saw my previous video, I did already the Frankie illustration. In this case, I'm doing the creature from the Black Lagoon. By the way, I didn't look at, I think I looked at the reference for this specific part, but for the most part, like the original sketch or 90% of what I did is completely out of my imagination. It's a version of that character. The reason I wanted to do this illustrations is because I have sort of a soft spot for the horror genre. This idea of how creatures and creature design has affected cinema and storytelling and the way we convey stories. So since I was a kid, something that stuck with me was all these images of Halloween monsters. That is also one of my favorite times of the year. Actually, my pursuit lately has been to get more into the character design world, I would say. So in this case, as you can see me here, I made a sketch. I have a layer that I specifically set up to add the feel for the character. If you're not aware of any of the things that I'm saying, please feel free to ask. Here I'm adding a fill layer. What it does, it helps me to create an alpha. If you don't know what an alpha is, feel free to add a comment down below and I'll go more in depth into that. But you basically, what I want is the area that covers the character well defined. What that allows me to do is to create sort of a mask that contains all the rendering of the character into that specific space. Now you can see me here trying to define the lighting. You have to first think of where the light is coming from. That's a really important part if you want to do sort of a 3D realistic type illustration. The first pass I do is just to capture the lighting scenario and the overall shapes of the character or whatever I'm painting. You can also see here that I have a layer on top that has the line art of the character. I did these sketches a while back and I thought I didn't do it justice, so I wanted to go back and revisit this specifically because my interest, as I mentioned in my other video, is if I am lucky enough to get to that, to make some of the creations I do into actual collectible toys or sculptures. So with that in mind, I wanted to convey what I envisioned into a more comprehensive piece. Subscribe. So with that in mind, I wanted to convey that idea. Sorry, this subscribe that always passes around here and starts acting like subscribe, driving his car. Yeah, but anyway, going back to what I'm talking about here, what I'm trying to convey is what I envisioned originally in my mind and also bring sort of the aspects of the characters that I really appreciate, because I had this idea in my mind of those characters sort of like specific scenes that I'm pretty sure everybody have seen. The monster getting out of the swamp and that sort of thing, that imagery. Also, there's all sorts of merchandise with them. That's what I grew up with. But I saw like snippets of the movie across a span of a really long time. So I didn't feel I was doing justice to the whole thing if I didn't actually go back and watch, for instance, in this case, the whole thing. So yeah, it took some time, and I went and watched the whole film, and I was really impressed by this movie. Is really old. I think it is from 1936 or something like that. If you check it out, you can probably find it in one streaming service. It's probably behind a bunch of other content, but you might probably be able to find it. And it's really interesting to see how with very little they were able to convey what they wanted to communicate. And still, like, one of the things I found fascinating about this old movies is that they express sort of an atmosphere around the characters, and you get it was a different time, so the timing of the movies was different. Now everything is sort of like fast paced, and you get to the action. Why are they there? Where did they come from? Why are they going to the place? Back then it wasn't there weren't that many, I guess, frames of reference. In a lot of cases they took their time with how they were going to convey the film and how they were going to set up the characters and so on. So you can see these set pieces of the characters interacting with each other and giving sort of a background story to each of them. The sad part of this whole thing was that I guess I knew this, or I was estimating that was gonna be the case, but they think they made a few more, but by the end they killed the creature. So I was like, why? Like the creature is not messing with anybody. It's literally on their environment, taking care of their own business, and they literally go into the middle of the jungle to look for it and just bother it. And yeah, to me it was kind of annoying, the fact that they killed the creature. I think they made a few more, so probably the creature wasn't actually dead, but like, you're messing with a creature that is supposed to be thousands of years old, and you're in their environment. You're the one who went and seek the creature out, and you go and bother it. Anyway, going back to my painting process, one of the things I mentioned in my other video is the fact that I told you already about the alpha that I created. I use that as a mask, so I added a clipping mask to the alpha. So whatever I'm painting in regards to the shapes, it's contained within this layer on top, and on the layer that has a fill, it's just the plain color. I was going specifically for shades of gray for these characters because they're from a time that you wouldn't have color in films. They didn't have that, so I wanted to just stick to that. By the end, I had some color tests that I did, and I have actually the version of this on my Redbubble shop if you want to check it out, that has colors on it, and I have the gray version of it. I might add another one just with the creature for stickers and so on. Going back to the painting process, in this case I was going specifically for grayscale, but there are some people that they usually, in regards to digital painting, because if you're working with clients you might get different notes in regards of the work that you're doing and so on and so forth, that they tend to work in grayscale, and then they add the color on top of that. What that allows you to do is that you have all the shapes already defined, and you can play around with the colors afterwards, which helps you to iterate different versions. I don't know how long this process will be used in big studios because of all this AI nonsense that is coming out, but that's basically the reason. You would paint in grayscale and then add the colors afterwards, so you can tweak around with the colors a lot more. Also, another thing that, for example, if you see me here, I go back and forth about it. One of the other things I use that I mentioned in my other video is the smear tool. What the smear tool allows you to do in Photoshop is to soften brush strokes, if that's what you want to. You can use it for different things. Of course, Photoshop was created partially to retouch photos, but the beginning of it was actually to work on film. So the use that you give to it, it depends on your main focus, but there's a lot of robust tools here that you can use in your favor for that. The smear tool is a tool that I find really useful for that, because sometimes I want the brush strokes to show, and sometimes I really don't. So it depends on the situation. Here you can see me adding textures to the character. This, well, it takes its time. I added the texture on a different layer, and I was trying to get sort of the fish skin texture on the character. Basically what you do is you take a soft brush and you turn it into a scatter, as I mentioned in my previous video, and that allows you to get that sort of texture, I guess, to a decent place. I'm always super critical of all the things I do, so I think I was happy by the end with this piece, but I don't know if that happens to anyone watching this video, but that whole thing of often you find looking at your previous work and you can only see the flaws on it. Any minor detail that you weren't able to get to, you can see it like a sore thumb. So yeah, I guess it's part of the process, that whole perfectionism creature that's behind anyone that wants to pursue something, get better at it if it's a skill. Here you can see me playing around with what I mentioned. I'm using soft brushes, and then sometimes I use the smear tool, sometimes I used a hard edge brush, a harder edge brush, and I play around with it to see what works better for the shape that I'm trying to define. I guess it all depends on the situation, but the overall idea is that you're playing around with soft and hard edges, and that's how all shapes are defined. You can see this in anything that you're trying to paint or recreate, and if you get in the habit of looking at things in this way, you can identify it more easier and convey it in your paintings. One of the things that I would say is difficult, it's not impossible, but difficult, is keeping your original light positioning, I would say. I've saw some AI things that you could add a 2D image and relight it depending on the point that you put the light on. After you already created the image, you can change the lighting on it. I haven't tried that. I actually cut out anything that was related to AI because of, well, it's a long subject. I'll probably make a video about this at some point, but yeah, I don't think it's good for anyone that creates art to get involved with that, with all due respect. In this case, I'm trying to find the teeth of the character. I wasn't that happy with the shapes. I think by the end I still wasn't happy with it, but it got to a better point in overall. Here, and as you can see, I'm refining the edges of the character. I had a few issues with the hands. If you see the original character, by the way, I didn't look at. I think I looked at the reference for this specific part, but for the most part, like the original sketch or 90% of what I did is completely out of my imagination. But if you go back and see the image of the character, you can see that it has webbing between the fingers. I think I thought about it too late, I would say. So I tried to add it and it just didn't hit. It didn't work with what I already had. So I went back and changed it. You're gonna see it at some point in the time lapse. By the way, this whole painting took me around, I'd say like 4 hours to do, with the caveat that of course I did take breaks in between to do other things. So probably was like, I don't know, 2.5 hours, 3 hours. Also, that's another thing that helps you in regards to your painting process. If you step back from what you're doing and revisit it later, or maybe it could be a day after, or even more sometimes. Of course, it depends. If you're working in a studio environment, you just have to get the job done. But if it's something that you're doing for yourself, or that you're doing for, depends on the project. Overall, if you're working for yourself, I would try this approach on stepping away from what you're doing and getting back into it with a fresh eye, because what happens is that your eye just gets tired with all the information that you're throwing at it, and it gets to a point that you get saturated with all that information, and then you just painting away without getting anywhere. That's something that happens sometimes. It depends also on the amount of motivation that you have at the moment, so I would consider that every now and then. Here you can see me again softening the edges of the character where it needs to, taking into consideration what textures I'm playing with. If it's skin, if it's a claw, if it's eels, if it's the eels of the character, if it's the eye. Yeah, it depends on that. I was trying to get that different feel depending on the surface of what I'm trying to paint. Also, this whole thing that I'm mentioning about painting in grayscale, you can, if you think about it from if you're a 3D artist or you're interested in 3D, what you do first is just the shapes. So what you're working is the volume of the character, whatever that may be. So you get a 3D shape that is usually in grayscale, and what that also allows you to do is, if you use gray, like 50% gray to start whatever you're doing, you can go up in regards to that, like from 50% gray to white, or you can go down in regards to the value, you can go to 100% darkness. So playing around with that allows you to have range in the painting, and also allows you to get sort of a nice contrast or flow to the painting, because sometimes if you're painting straight up with color, and if you're traditionally trained, you probably won't have this problem, because you learn to identify and sort of translate whatever you're looking at into the painting or the artwork that you're creating. But sometimes it can be a little bit harder if it's someone that is just starting out straight into digital painting to get a feel for what I'm saying. For me, actually, it was harder to try to do this grayscale thing first. first, I don't know how many years of digital painting, I usually use color straight up because it was more comfortable for me. I would say like right now I wouldn't mind using this technique. The thing with me using color instead of black and white was that I felt like you couldn't get all the nuance or the soft transition between colors that you would get if you just straight up selected the color and this is the color I want here and this is a. So there's an argument to be had in regards to that, but from a practical standpoint, I would say this makes more sense if you're working, as I said, for a client or you want to do iterations of the piece that you're doing. This makes a lot of sense because you can do it as many times as you like. When you do it in color, you're kind of constrained to that, and you can also have what I was trying to get to, the problem that it creates, that is that you might not get a nice transition or a good contrast on the painting. That's something to consider there. Here, by this point, you see that I took out the webbing on the fingers. But anyway, the point is I stopped painting for a little bit, and when I came back, I knew that my focus was on the hands because I think it wasn't well defined. So I went in and thought about all the details that a hand would have in this case. How can I showcase like the nails or the claws of the character? Actually, here you can see me, I messed up and it sort of has double muscle on the hand, and yeah, I'm defining the shapes there, completely oblivious of what I'm saying because in my mind I already solved that in the original drawing, but later on I started looking at the hand and oh, this looks weird, and I went in and modified the anatomy so it would showcase the hand as it should be, with just one muscle there. I would say something that helps, or I would say like it's one of the most important things in regards to art. Doesn't matter if you're doing 2D or tradition, like if you're doing traditional painting or if you're doing digital painting. I would say is observation. So in my mind, whenever I create one of these creatures that you can see on my Instagram or on my social media, on my portfolio, I try to work a lot from my imagination, so I can use that because I take a lot of time doing observation of different things. Like used to love documentaries and National Geographic, Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, whatever I can get my hands on to look at different creatures and I guess ways of living or things that I couldn't go in person to see, like a lion in the savannah, or a polar bear, or deep sea fish. So if you practice this enough, you start to have sort of a database on your brain of all this, I would say to some extent useless information, until you have to do something like this. And all like what would happen if I combine, in this case, a human with this sea creature with anime toy type of thing? How can I exaggerate the features to the maximum? What you can see on this illustration and the other ones that I made on this same subject touch on that. I'm trying to mix up things that I find interesting and present them in a new way to the extent that I possibly can. So yeah, overall the process that I use is, for at this point, when I was starting out, I didn't have I would say I didn't have a process, but it repeats in these steps of having sort of the shape of the character separated. Then I have the overall shapes of it. Then I have sometimes I have the highlights on a different layer, or sometimes I have the shine on the eyes on a different layer. I want to make darker here the mouth, so I'm painting over what I have under that, because it's supposed to be a cavity, so you wouldn't see you would have some occlusion on the teeth, and so on and so forth. It depends on what you're trying to do, the approach that you're gonna have. This whole thing of the textures, I think for the most part, unless I messed up and painted by mistake on a different layer, I'm usually keeping that on a separate layer so I can delete it if I don't like it. Here already I'm testing out the colors. As you can see there, I separated a different color and just set it to overlay and just started painting what I wanted, and I ended up with a few versions of the character with different colors, different color schemes. Yeah, I added a little bit of skin color to the gums of the character. I wasn't that happy with it. I don't remember if I deleted that or repainted it, but I know I wasn't happy with the way it looked. For whatever reason, I wasn't getting it exactly, so by this point I was starting to get frustrated with it. Maybe I deleted most of it and just kept the most subtle version of it that I could. And I also wanted to add sort of the accents, different combinations of color that would make the character pop. If you saw my other video, I talk about when you're working in 3D, you get used to the fact that when any creature, depending on if the skin is close to a bone, for example, it would change the color of the skin. And if you look enough into any creatures, if it's not like a shell or that sort of thing, we all have that, and that ends up adding to the overall of the character. Well, this is by this point I'm almost done with the character. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. Check any of the links down below where I have merch with him on it and a bunch of other stuff. If you stick till this point, hit the subscribe button. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you all for watching. Hope to see you next time. Bye.